Today we'll talk about 18FT305 Basics of Fiber, Yarn and Fabric Manufacturing. And we are at Unit 5 and we are seeing the fabric manufacturing process. In the lesson 2, we will talk about different looms, how looms are getting classified. In the earlier lessons, we have seen the different types of fabrics, how it is produced in different processes. Now, in this, we will talk about the woven looms, and woven looms will mainly focus on the shuttle loom, different components of the shuttle loom, different mechanisms. Then there is a small part of shuttle-less looms and other popular modern looms. So in this lesson, basically we will see about different areas of loom, different structures of the loom, and what are the different parts are there in the loom. And in the next lesson, we will talk about the shuttle-less loom. So let us start with the classification of loom. Now, when you are talking about the loom, you can see in the figure there are two types of looms are available. Now, one is the hand loom made of wooden structure, and another is the power loom. Okay, it is a power driven machines. So these are the different structures of loom. Now let us see different components of loom also in those structures. As you can see in the figure, the basic structure of a loom has been shown here. It starts from the warp beam, which is produced from the warping. Then the warp yarns are passed to the heeled frame, harness we call it as, and then it passed to the reed. Okay, and then the woven cloth is getting produced by weft yarn or the filling yarn, and finally it is wound on the cloth roll. So these are the basic structure of a loom. Now let us see the primary, secondary and tertiary motions of weaving loom.
Welcome to Textile Vlog. Stay with us and enrich your textile knowledge. Weaving, one of the oldest technologies practiced by humans, is the process of fabric manufacturing by interlacing two sets of yarn called warp and weft. Weaving can be summarized as a repetition of these three actions, also called the primary motions of the loom: shading, picking, beating up or battening, shading, where the warp threads are separated by raising or lowering heeled frames to form a clear space where the pick can pass. Picking, where the weft or pick is propelled across the loom by hand, an air jet, a rapier, or a shuttle. Beating up or battening, where the weft is pushed up against the fill of the cloth by the reed. The warp is divided into two overlapping groups or lines that run into plans, one above another, so the shuttle can be passed between them in a straight motion. Then the upper group is lowered by the loom mechanism, and the lower group is raised, allowing the shuttle to pass in the opposite direction, also in a straight motion. Repeating these actions forms a fabric mesh, but without beating up. The final distance between the adjacent wefts would be irregular and far too large. The secondary motions of the loom are the let-off motion and take-up motion. Let-off motion, where the warp is let off the warp beam at a regulated speed to make the filling even and of the required design. Take-up motion takes up the woven fabric in a regulated manner so that the density of filling is maintained. The tertiary motions of the loom are the stop motions, to stop the loom in the event of a thread break. The two main stop motions are the warp stop motion and weft stop motion. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe this channel to get more updates. And
So we have seen the different motions of a loom and how simultaneously they work. Now let us see the individual motions. First we will start with the primary motions of a loom. Now first one is the shading. Now what do we mean by the shading? It is a dividing of warp threads into two groups. So as we can see in the figure. So this is called the shading motions, and there is a shade formations by dividing the warp threads. And typically these shading operations, if we try to classify them, we can see that different types of shades are also there, as is shown in the figure. Now what are the different types of shade? The raised and lowered form of warp yarn is called the shade, okay? And shade can be formed depending on the basis of the shade geometry. This is broadly divided into two classes. What are those classes? As we can see, one is called the closed shading and another is called the open shading. So in this figure we can see the semi-open shade, circular shade, bottom closed shade and the open shade. So their geometrical structures are different. As we can see in this figure, we can easily understand the different types of shading depending upon the motions. Number one is the tappet shading, where a cam is working. So depending upon the cam's movement, the tappet movement, the heel shafts are to and fro movements are there, up and down movements are there. Then there is one particular shading arrangement is called the dobby. So dobby shading is there, and similarly the jacquard shading is there. So these are the different shading operations which are coming under the primary motions of a loom. Now three types of shading motion available for different types of fabrics. Let us see the tappet shading. What is tappet shading? As is shown in the figure, the mechanism of tappet shading. So how different types of tappets are moving here. And different type of structures can be produced from the tappet shadings. So plain, twill, satin, so different kinds of woven structures are produced from the tappet shading mechanism. Now what are the dobby shading? Now let us see how the dobby shading works. So this is the schematic view of the dobby shading operations. And the figure of the dobby is shown here also in the image. Now different type of fabric structures are produced which are different from the plain fabric like twill, plain or the satin. So here little bit of threads and all interlacements are little different in the dobby shading. It is little complicated than the tappet shading operations. Then primary motions also talks about the jacquard shading. What do you mean by jacquard shading? In earlier days, this type of cards were used in the jacquard as is shown in the figure. But nowadays, all electronic jacquards have come into the place, and different types of geometrical complicated designs, those can be produced from the jacquard shading operations. So these are the primary motions of a loom. Now peaking is the next operations. What is the peaking? Insertion of weft through the passage created, that is the shading, the different types of shades are created. So when weft thread is passed to that package or the loom, so that we call is at a peak. So the peak is inserted by peaking operations. So and that goes via the shading mechanism. So weft threads are getting introduced here by peaking, as is shown also in the loom. Then another operations in the primary motions comes under beating operations or beat up operations, pushing the newly inserted weft yarn through the shade into the fail of the cloth, that is the already woven fabric, which is schematically shown here. The how peak is pushed by the reed and is shown here in the particular picture. Now these are the primary motions of a loom. Now let us see what are the secondary motions of a loom. First one is the let-off motion. What do you mean by the let-off motions? Let-off motion causes unrolling of warp from the warp beam. So this is the schematic view of the secondary motions or the let-off motions. So unrolling of warp from the warp beam, it takes place, and finally it goes via these different mechanisms, and it goes up to the take-up roller. So this is called the let-off motions or the secondary motions of a loom. Now take-up motions, when we are talking, it causes rolling of the cloth roller and cloth. Okay, as can be seen here, the cloth roller is there. So let-off roller, it is going from the backrest and then different other arrangements, and when the interlacing of warp and weft threads takes place, so it ultimately wound or the take-up motion is operated, and cloth roll is getting activated by these take-up motions. So the fabrics or the clothing is getting wound onto this cloth roller by the take-up motion. Then the tertiary motions of a looms are also there. What are those tertiary motions of a loom? Like warp stop motions, then weft stop motions. So in this fashion, some brake mechanisms. So those are all coming under the tertiary motions of a loom. Now let us see, what do you mean by the shuttle-less loom? Now main characteristics of shuttle-less loom is that the weft yarns are inserted with special tools. Here no shuttle is used, and shuttle-less looms operated at low noise level, and they are very fast weaving. So these are the characteristics of shuttle-less loom. And one example of shuttle-less loom is that the water jet loom. So woven fabric, as we have seen, different mechanisms are adopted, like plain fabrics or the basket fabrics or the twill fabrics or the satin fabrics. So those kind of fabrics are produced from the normal woven material or the tappet shading operations. Then comes little bit of designed fabric. So those kind of things are produced from the dobby fabric, and then dobby structures or dobby weave is getting produced out of that. Then finally comes the jacquard weaving, where lot of floral pattern or all over patterns are getting produced, and the complicated designs can be woven by the jacquard shading mechanism. So we have seen here the plain shading or the plain woven structure, then dobby structure, and also the jacquard structures. So summary of this particular lesson, we have seen that looms, if we try to divide, one is the hand loom, another is the power loom. Now hand loom also, the dobby and jacquards are also there. Now dobby and jacquard can also be there in the power loom. Now in case of the shuttle loom, we can also see that non-automatic or semi-automatic or fully automatic shuttle looms are also there. And when we talk about such kind of automatic, non-automatic or semi-automatic, so warp pattern and weft patterns, okay, those two kind of patterns can be produced. So warp pattern is by tappet, dobby and jacquard, and wave pattern is multiple boxes can be used here. And power loom also talks about the shuttle-less loom. So we will see in the next lesson that different modern looms are different shuttle-less looms. So those can be categorized as projectile loom, rapier loom, and the air jet or water jet loom. So basically in this lesson we have seen that different mechanism by which the cloth can be produced, and we have seen that primary motions are operated there, okay, in terms of shading, picking and beat up process. Then comes the secondary operation, that is the tick up and the let off motions, and finally the motions which are called the tertiary motions, which are also important for running a loom. So those are different warp stop motion, wave stop motions and different break motions. So those are the different areas of loom and different structure of the loom which has been covered in this lesson 2. Thank you.